Welcome back, everybody. It is 8:33 p.m., October 12th, 2017. That is Eastern Time. All right, we have a new disturbance, one that we actually spoke about this morning that we were kind of expecting to be a disturbance. It is a 20% over the next 5 days. It's this area I'm circling right here. We were talking about this exact area this morning because of the density of these storms. We had our mimic chart up that showed the water vapor and the forward rolling, and we were basically saying we would expect this to happen by the end of the day. And we do have it. It is a fairly low percentage as of right now, but that's usually how they start. You can see right here these exploding clouds. You can almost see that momentum going into a counterclockwise motion. We have Ophelia up here, which is now a Category 2 storm, 100-mile sustained winds the last time I checked. That will probably rise, but it is beginning to move north now. The reason the speed is so slow is because it's changing from a eastern direction up to the north. So it's actually slowing down, getting ready to make its turn. And that's still a threat to the UK. The UK may be dealing with a landfall from this hurricane. And that is showing on a few charts. Tropical Tidbits is showing it, and the spaghetti models have updated to also show a landfall. Now, that doesn't mean it's 100%. For those of you that are worrying a bit in the UK, this doesn't mean that it's definitely going to be a hurricane when it hits, because many times, more times than not, when these storms get pulled up so far north, they tend to get really pulled apart by the jet stream. It's a lot of high winds. That's why you rarely get hurricanes up in that area. I didn't look up the exact year. I know it was in the 60s was the last time an actual hurricane, a formed hurricane with an eye wall, hit that area. Ophelia does still have an eye wall. It is still a very powerful hurricane. It'll probably be a Cat 3 before it starts getting pulled up quickly to the north, and when that starts happening, that's when you're going to see it start spreading apart a lot, and that's why we may not be dealing with a legit hurricane at landfall. It may bring a lot of wind and rain, still nothing to look forward to, but for those of you that were starting to worry in the UK, I'm going to report on this every day and keep you guys posted. So as of right now, Ophelia is a hurricane. It is 100 mile an hour sustained winds, and it's moving northeast, I want to say, at about 3 miles an hour. So very slow, a lot of time for change. We're going to keep an eye on it. Now, as far as our disturbance goes, right down here in the bottom right corner, this is the disturbance. It doesn't have a 48-hour percentage yet. It is fairly new. It has definitely a chance to form, guys. We're seeing it happen right in front of our eyes. It has developed over the last 8 hours. You can see a lot of these storms blowing up. You get those very dense white colors that we always talk about. And once they start connecting to each other and you start getting a forward movement and counterclockwise roll, that's what you have to look out for. And over the last couple days, we've been saying it did have more of a western movement that would bring it almost landfall into South America, hopefully before it forms. But it looks to me like it is pulling a little bit to the northwest now, going towards the Lesser Antilles and Leeward Islands. So once that happens, then we're going to be dealing with our warm water belt that we always talk about that carries these hurricanes either underneath Puerto Rico and then more of a chance in the Gulf, or above Puerto Rico and more times than enough to the East Coast. But because of the cold weather and because of these the dips in the jet stream, if this does form, I'm thinking more of a southern hurricane. I'm not going to go into any sort of projections on where I think it's going to go as of right now, only because we just don't know this far out. It's almost irresponsible to guess where it's going to go, but we are going to look at charts. We're going to see what it says right now, but this is our disturbance here. We still have our counterclockwise movement passing over southern Florida and Cuba. And something else we pointed out, guys, we talked about how if this thing got into the Gulf, if it was going to start churning up the water on the surface, and it is exactly doing that. And I have a chart pulled up for you to show you. This is our warm water chart. If you remember, all these reds were down in this area, and now you can see they're starting to bleed through that gap that we were talking about, that Nate shot through. So you can see those red colors being pulled up almost under South Florida, and that's all because of that momentum rolling here like we talked about. So it's actually happening sooner than I thought. I figured it would happen once the backside of the counterclockwise movement was in the Gulf already, but we can see even the front side, even though it's pulling down, some of that water is being forced up through this gap. So it is bringing warmer water into the Gulf, and that was my concern, because the warmer the water gets here, the more chance we have of that already existing counterclockwise motion forming into a storm, unless it gets pulled to the other side of the Gulf and over Mexico and hopefully die out. So we got to keep an eye on that. And we will keep an eye on it, absolutely. Every single day I'm going to report on this until it's no longer an issue. But you can see here, guys, with our disturbance that's now marked on the charts as a disturbance. Here it is, 20% chance over 5 days. It is low, but it is there, and we're talking about the second week of October, a storm forming in the Atlantic off of the west coast of Africa, like we've been watching, in a spot that we don't usually get these storms. Now, if you go, there is a chart. I don't have it pulled up for you. I'm going to start using it more and more. But there's a chart out there that shows all hurricanes that have formed in this area in October. And I remember from the chart, there were a few dots out here. They mark them with red dots, and there were a few out here. So it's not completely uncommon. But this system did come off of the west coast of Africa. We've been watching it for days and days, and it broke apart a little bit, and then it reformed right here. And if you remember in the video, we talked about how it may hit South America, the north side of South America. It looks to be a bit north of that now, and it's projected to swing up in this area. So once it gets up here, if it forms, that's when we really got to pay attention to it, because this is already putting Puerto Rico at risk. Of course, after the Lesser Antilles and the Leeward Islands would get hit by it. So we just need to see how much it progresses as a disturbance before it's a significant storm. And that's why you see this checkerboard pattern here. This is where they expect it to form if it does form. And once it's here, guys, that's we got to think about the East Coast. We got to think about the south part of Florida again. If it stays here, it may get pulled away beforehand, kind of like Ophelia got stuck in this area the whole time of its lifespan so far. But nonetheless, guys, we got a disturbance here. We need to watch it, and that's why I'm reporting on it. Really quick, just to catch up on the spaghetti plots for Ophelia, we can see our black triangle now. Its current direction is basically straight north. Yeah, that is exactly north. So I guess it doesn't have a eastern movement yet. Sorry, but still projected to start making an eastern move and then get pulled right up. And it looks like it's going right at the UK. But again, guys, don't get crazy about this storm just yet. It may get ripped apart into a much broader system, which means the winds will cover a larger area, but they will be much weaker winds. So that is something that is positive news on this. Again, we're going to keep an eye on it until it is gone. And just to go back to why that warm water once again is getting pulled through this gap, you can see it's this system here, and it's also partially from systems coming off of that almost by Cancun, just south of Cancun. You can see some of this water vapor getting pulled up as this system is pushing water this way, and it's causing a swirl, and it's causing that surface water, like we talked about, to come up into the Gulf. So we need to keep an eye on that too. I will be watching it. I watch these charts all throughout the day. Just because I don't report on them doesn't mean I'm not watching them. But this is still an issue here, this system here. If you notice, as it gets to Florida and Cuba, it does break up and lose some of its spin. But we have clear spin going on right here by the Bahamas still. So as long as there's water vapor in this area, this is going to be a concern. And also, we may see another disturbance up here. Now, the disturbance chart, like I showed you, is right here. It brings it up right to this area, to the far east of the Bahamas. And you can see here, this would be that area right here. So they're expecting this storm, if it does form, we're going to be watching it to come up in this area and then may become a hurricane right around here. And then after that, it's all based on the jet stream once again to determine where this storm is going to go. I'm assuming as of right now, as we can see here, this is a high pressure area in the Bermuda Atlantic. That's what it's called. And if this storm were to sit up in this area, this pressure here would force it this way. It wouldn't come up here and get stuck. It would be pressed in this area, because these storms, when there's no momentum as far as shear winds or the jet stream, they tend to just want to shoot straight north. And I'm pretty sure that's because of the Earth's spin. I've read that in a bunch of different places, but it's not an exact science, so that's why you don't really hear them talking about it much, not like they do with the Earth's spin being the reason for storms going in a counterclockwise motion in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, they go the other way. So you can just kind of relate that back to why we see counterclockwise storms all the time in the northern hemisphere. And back to this chart really quick, our widespread radar chart. You can see that nearly perfect eye wall on Ophelia here, and we're getting that red donut color. Now, the denser those reds get, that tells you that the storm is still getting much stronger, and we saw it grow all throughout the day. We're at, once again, 100 miles an hour. That may be a little quicker now. I saw that about an hour and a half ago. But again, guys, as far as the U.S. goes, main concern right now is going to be this disturbance here. We see those big, big red storms exploding, and that's what you need to look for. For those of you that want to check these charts and start making your own forecasts and predictions, this is what you look for. Now, I wouldn't go ahead and say when you see this, oh, here's a disturbance. You really want to rely on these charts because we could wake up tomorrow and this disturbance could be gone if it breaks up. That's why it's such a low number. It's 20% over 5 days, which is low. That doesn't even give it a shot over the next 2 days. So a lot can change, but it's still very much worth reporting. And finally, I just want to show you our mimic chart again, the combination of water vapor and wind charts. And we can clearly see the storm that we were checking out this morning that we were concerned about is showing more and more of that forward roll, the counterclockwise motion. And then eventually, if it does form, you're going to start seeing something like this, like Ophelia. Now remember, guys, just because I showed you that warm water chart, and we were right, this thing is pulling warm water into the Gulf, and it's beginning to be more of a warmer average temperature. I don't think you're going to see those deep burgundy reds in the Gulf, but it's still plenty for hurricane formation, and we know that because Ophelia basically formed in the cooler waters of the ocean. So, and this storm's been sitting out here for days and days in these blues. So those of you that tell you that these can't form in warm water, that is not true. We saw it happen with Ophelia, and not only that, but Ophelia survived and is surviving for days and days in here. So that's where we're at, guys. We got still the system between Cuba and South Florida churning up the water, bringing all the warm water into the Gulf. It may be the reason it forms, so it's actually helping itself. And then we got our actual disturbance noticed on the charts. Forward momentum roll, counterclockwise, expected to come up to the north of the leeward Lesser Antilles and possibly be a hurricane right around here. If it does form, guys, that's where Philippe is going to be. Philippe is the next name, unless something dramatic happens in the Gulf with this system here. So that's where we're at. That's our nightly update. I'm going to have a full update for you on the fires and this system tomorrow morning with the coffee. All right, guys, thank you very much.